This edition of MacVoices is supported by Smile, the makers of PDF Pen and PDF Pen Pro. PDF editing for your Mac, iPhone, and iPad. Learn more at smilesoftware.com. Welcome to MacVoices. This is the talk of the Apple community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. And folks, it seems like we do take control authors and just sort of little sprints. We get a bunch of books, and then they all disappear back into their holes to write new books. And so this may be the start of another sprint. I'm not sure, but we will see. This time around, though, we have Jeff Carlson back with us. Jeff, great to have you again. Thanks so much.
Always happy to be back. And you're right. It's funny how, Apple keeps us on our toes, definitely on the different titles for Take Control. But there's always good stuff to write about. So as long as people like the books, then we're going to keep doing them.
Hey, it's a nice problem to have, as long as you got good material to work with.
Exactly.
So this time we're going to talk about the second edition of your Take Control of Your Digital Storage book. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of surprised to see a revision or a second edition. At least my perception is it felt like we didn't talk that long ago about this. And so I'm curious as to what has changed that made you say, second edition, we really need to get this out.
Well, this was partially a something that was already on the roadmap to do. When we talked, I think a few months ago, we just released version 1.1, and that was basically just to cover some of the APFS stuff that happened in Catalina, basically a maintenance update. Sometimes those come about just because a couple things have changed. In that case, we probably could have held off, except that Catalina introduced this new APFS file structure where the system is on a separate volume as the data, and the system is read-only. And so that was just different and potentially confusing enough that we wanted to have something out that updated that for people who are going to run into it when they're using disk utility, for example. So that kind of showed up midstream in the planning of doing a version 2, a second edition that we have now. So now this is just the completion of that, I guess.
Got it. And you're right. I mean, that then and now, and probably even more important now as we head to Big Sur, to really get a better understanding of APFS. APFS? Yeah, APFS said it right. Because it's sort of strange. It's a little bit different structure. It shows up a little differently in things like disk utility, but it also feels so very familiar that at times it's like, well, I'm seeing 2 disks, but I only have one. Why? Mm-hmm. And by the way, I can't really do anything with that other disk. It's just sitting there.
Right. I mean, the weird thing about this book is, ideally it shouldn't exist because everything will just work perfectly. Right. Yeah. And so, everything is just supposed to work. As we know, it doesn't always work out that way. And so what happens is, and I make this metaphor in the book, it's like opening up a wall in your house. Something's wrong. You need to find out what's back there. And so you open up a section of the wall, and if you don't, if you're not a contractor, if you're not an electrician, then, it can be kind of confusing. Is this a hot water pipe? Is it a cold water pipe? Is this electrical? And I say this as somebody who, you do not want me opening up walls in a house, because I lack that construction gene that just makes me be able to go, oh yeah, this is your cold water return, and this is your this and that. And so what this means is when you take this into like the disk metaphor, once you start looking at, say, disk utility and something goes wrong and you need to find out, why did I seem to lose data, or why is my hard drive, making noise or acting slow? And you open up disk utility, and suddenly you're faced with a bunch of things that are not as straightforward. And so that's kind of the reason for the book is to be able to go, okay, something's wrong, and this is going to give you the understanding to go in and fix it and know what you're dealing with, so that you don't accidentally say erase a volume or create a partition that you didn't mean to, and things like that.
Yeah, and I think we're all playing more and more with this stuff as Apple makes it more powerful and easier, at least theoretically, to access. But like everything else, when you get more power, it's just by the nature of it, it just has to get a little more complicated, or maybe a lot more complicated. And that's where you can make some mistakes. And that's one reason I think we preach backups here. Well, it's one of the many reasons. We preach backups for a lot of reasons. But especially if you're going to mess with some of this stuff, you want to be able to return back to where it was in case you do anything wrong.
Yeah, exactly. So you asked like what's new in the book. Some of this actually came about from our last conversation when we had the discussion of APFS snapshots, which are also called time machine local snapshots. And we had this great, again, going back to metaphors of this chair that is removed from a room, taken outside, burned, but then somehow replaced. I mean, in addition to that being a really fun interview with you to do, it really helped kind of crystallize this explanation. And so that section talking about APFS snapshots as backups and how they differ from actual quote unquote backups, that section got pretty widely expanded, just to make sure people knew what was going on. Because, you might run into a situation like you just said where, maybe you're making an update and you want to make sure that if something goes wrong, you can easily go back to, the state where things were working. And, yes, you can make a duplicate of your hard drive and you can do a time machine backup and all of that. But, for example, you can also just make an APFS snapshot, and some of them get made automatically. There are ways that you can just make one manually in the terminal, and that way you can then do your update. If something went screwy, you just basically revert back a step, and it saves a huge amount of time and effort and expense and hair that you pulled out because something went wrong and you don't know where it is. I say all of this with personal experience. So yeah, that's one of the things that are new. I also beefed up the discussion of SSDs. So part of I feel like I'm sort of going around in circles. Part of the book is to not just throw you right into disk utility and fixing things, but also, convey that understanding of, okay, like how does storage work? I mean, it's not quite the, first there were the dinosaurs kind of history lesson. It's talking about like the difference between, traditional mechanical hard drives versus solid state hard drives, SSDs. And partially, again, like that shouldn't really matter because your files are just being stored somewhere, right? But SSDs have been what's a good way, like a huge change in the way we handle storage and the way we do computing and performance. If anybody is watching this and you have a Mac that has like a traditional hard disk, the spinning platter kind, if you replace that with an SSD, you will get like 3 years of extra use out of your computer. I did that with a computer that I had. It's just the performance boost is so significant, and that that's great in one sense, but it's also like you kind of have to know what's going on because there are implications for, say, how files are erased and how that affects the life of your storage. So to be really top level here, SSDs have a finite lifespan. Hard disks also have a finite lifespan, but it's not measured in the same way. With a hard disk, because you have so many moving pieces, there's more chance of, like the little actuator arm that's reading from the disk, there's more chance that that might break, or, you drop the hard disk, or your computer falls to the ground or something. And then you have a mechanical problem. With an SSD, basically all the little cells where the data is written, they just wear out after a while. That's just the way it is. And so I explained like sort of how that works and how that, impacts the life of your hard drive, and how to figure out, when a hard drive might be failing, those kind of things. Here I go again. I'm just going to tell you everything all in one long sentence. So,
well, there are a couple things I wanted to go back there on, and I'll try to remember the second one. But the first one, this is not take control of backups, all right? But the snapshots, and this sort of goes back to our previous discussion. But right now, how do you feel about snapshots as on the same device, on the same drive, if you will, kind of backup, as opposed to a clone off to another? I mean, and this is not the question of how many backups should you have, one on site, one stored in the Arctic Circle and somewhere else. But the idea that, okay, I'm gonna play with my system, and I'm dependent upon that snapshot that you just said I can create in the terminal. I'm dependent on that to put my system back the way it was an hour ago, but it's still on the same device.
This is true. Yeah, it's the snapshots are really more, I think, more a matter of convenience than critical issue. So, if you suspect that there's some sort of hardware trouble, like something is truly wonky, a snapshot's not going to really help you. What a snapshot can do is, it's actually good to think of a snapshot in terms of time machine, partially because Apple, like technically, time machine and snapshots are different, but they are similar enough that Apple uses the same interface for it. So if you do not have a time machine disk attached, so an external drive that you're using for time machine, when it is attached, it gets backed up every hour, and the files that have changed since the last backup get copied over to your time machine disk. And that's why you have that great ability to say, oh, you know what? I threw away this important file 2 days ago, and I accidentally emptied the trash, and now I really need that file. And you can go to Time Machine, connect your Time Machine disk, go back, and that file is still there in the state that it was at 2 days ago, right? So that's Time Machine on one side. The APFS snapshot is basically doing the same thing, and it's doing it roughly on the same schedule, like once every hour, but with no time machine disk attached. And it's just saving these snapshots on your internal hard drive. Now, if the drive is super full, it may not make as many. It's a little bit of, kind of black magic how Apple decides to make these, but in general, it's going to be every hour, back about a day or so. And that gives you the ability to say, all right, I didn't have my time machine disk attached, but I know that this file that I had last night that I can't find now, that I may have accidentally deleted, or, I changed a paragraph and I saved it, and I realized that the earlier paragraph was what I needed. You can go back to that, and you use the same interface. You actually, enter Time Machine, but instead of seeing maybe like weeks and weeks or months of backups on the side of the window there, you'll see just maybe a day or so. But it still lets you go back to those versions. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. It's just again, I want to make sure we're very clear when we start telling people that well, you can just go back. That there
Yeah.
are certain not dangers, but certain caveats to that. And
Yes.
so, it's having a completely separate drive that you've cloned off to, and that you can take and put in the next room. So there's no chance of anything that you're doing anything to it. I mean, disconnect it and obviously keep it away is
Yeah.
just really, really important for folks to understand. Today's edition of MacVoices is supported by Smile, the makers of world-class software. If you haven't noticed, Smile has made a number of upgrades to PDFpen recently, making it even more useful. Things like the ability to add page labels in multiple formats for documents, new stationery options to customize your page designs, a new magnifier window that lets you zoom up to 2,000%, and something that everyone has run into at one time or another. Now you can optimize your PDF file size as much as you need, tweaking color, grayscale, or monochrome images, and even remove third-party metadata, all to save size, so your file can be emailed or archived while retaining quality. Those and a few hundred other features are all standard in PDFpen. PDFpen Pro adds even more, including the ability to use DocuSign to send documents easily and securely. The new versions of PDFpen and PDFpen Pro work with PDFpen for iPhone and iPad, allowing seamless editing across devices when used with Dropbox or iCloud, so you can work wherever, whenever, and on whatever device you wish. Get all the details at smilesoftware.com/podcast. That's smilesoftware.com/podcast, the makers of world-class software like PDFpen and PDFpen Pro. Thanks to Smile for their ongoing support of MacVoices. The other thing, though, you bring up SSDs versus spindle drives, and it strikes me right now that we're in a very interesting time because you're right, SSDs will greatly improve the life, and they will spoil you. Once you go to SSDs, you never want to go back to
Oh,
spindles.
it's so true. So
Oh,
true.
but we also are seeing a lot more options that are trickling down to small business and the home. We're seeing NAS devices, network attached storage devices. We're seeing now RAIDs of the various flavors of RAID, which is redundant array of intelligent disks? Integrated.
Integrated, yeah.
Integrated disks. And folks, if you don't know what that means taking like multiple drives and using software to bundle them together or put them together so they act like one drive. The benefit being that with all those different drives, you can read and write a whole lot faster. You can get a much better performance out of spindle drives. So we have suddenly all these new options. It feels like that for a while, network attached storage was, that was IT stuff, and RAIDs was even more IT stuff. And now,
totally.
Now it's like, I'm running 3 RAIDs and and a couple NASs, and it's no big deal. So, how much of that is addressed in the book?
You just did a really good advertisement for my book right there. Because there's a whole section on RAIDs that explains what all this means, because you may run into a RAID and not even know it. Like a lot of hard disks that are being sold now at really high capacities, like maybe 16 terabyte hard disk, right? Inside, you probably have maybe 2 or 4 smaller hard disks that are acting as one, and that gives manufacturers a way to say, no, we've got a 16 terabyte hard disk right here that you can buy at Costco for $300 or whatever. But what's going on underneath is they've already set it up as a RAID, because it's just the way to make smaller drives work together as one. So I explain the different RAID levels and how the data is copied among the drives, because there are issues of you can set them up so that they are so that they share data in a in a way that is faster and gives you more performance. But there's also ways that you can set it up so that a RAID offers redundancy. So if one of those drives fails, then the whole thing isn't completely blown. That's also something that really comes into account when you have a NAS, network attached storage, because you are often using multiple disks. It's also something that I think most people are probably not going to get one of these things and say, okay, I need to restripe this as a RAID 10 array, and but you may find yourself thinking, okay, I'm using a lot of video, or I need something that has a lot of storage that can be on my network that has an archive of all my work, and how do I get to that? And so you may decide, okay, like for example, a lot of the NAS devices now, they're usually set up with a certain file system or a certain RAID level, but you can go in and change that if you want, if you know what you're doing. And so it's that kind of explanation of, okay, this is what you're going to run into, and this is what it means, and this is where you can get a benefit from it. I think a lot of the book also, it almost sounds cheap to say this, but a lot of the book is also kind of a buying guide. And I don't mean in the sense of, go out and buy this one hard drive or buy this brand or whatever. But, again, from personal experience and from talking to other people, once you hit that stage where you're like, I need more storage than I have in my computer. And especially these days, because I think there are probably only 2 Mac models that ship with traditional hard drives. I think that's right. Basically, most everything is now an SSD of some sort, and the SSDs, especially in like all the laptops, those are not the kind of SSDs that you can just plug in and out. MacBook Pros, basically everything's just kind of soldered to the logic board there. So you're like, okay, I only have 500 gigs of storage. I'm filling that up quick because I have a lot of photos. What am I going to do next? Am I just going to go and buy a 2 terabyte drive that connects by USB? Or do I need to get something like a NAS? And a lot of what the book does, and this has been in the second edition, I beefed this up especially for the NAS section, is asking those questions like, why would you even get a NAS? Like why not just go buy a big hard drive, at Costco or Amazon versus something that has its own operating system? Well, there's a lot of really good reasons to do that. And it could be that even though Costco has 8 terabyte hard drive for $200. I'm just making that up. I don't know what they are right now. That might be good for a year or two, but if you spend maybe $400 on a NAS, that's something you can use for the next 4 years. So there's, again, you sort of open up the box, you open up the wall, and suddenly there are a bunch more questions about your storage that you didn't even think about. And if you think about them in the right way, it makes it a lot better sort of in the longer term to figure out, okay, you know what? I knew that I, am doubling my storage needs every year. So I should probably get maybe 4 times the amount that I think I need now, because that way, when tax time rolls around next year, I know that, maybe that's when I need to buy a bigger storage, or I won't need to worry about storage for 3 years. So that kind of stuff. Yeah. It doesn't sound very exciting, but once you're in that position where you need to start thinking about storage, it just like all the questions spin out in all sorts of directions. And this book is basically like, okay, like we've got this. Here's what you should be thinking about. We're going to guide you through this whole thing so that you don't drive yourself crazy, or you don't find yourself like spending 20 hours at Amazon or reading reviews or going to newegg.com and seeing, 4,000 different hard drives, or trying to figure out like, okay, I know I want an SSD. Do I want to get NVMe memory? Do I want to get a more standard SSD? Like all these things just come up and you're just like, I don't want to be an IT person. I just want to store my files. And that's what this is for.
Those darn geeks, they always come up with alphabet soup.
Darn geeks, yeah.
Jeff Carlson will be back in the next edition of MacVoices to talk more about his book, Take Control of Your Digital Storage. We tackle some of those large, cheap drives you see at Best Buy and Costco and why you may or may not want to take advantage of them, the color coding that manufacturers do to try to designate what drive is for what purpose, and a whole lot more. Join us then on MacVoices. As always, thanks for watching. Visit MacVoices.com for show notes and to connect with Chuck on social media. Get involved in our Facebook group or like our Facebook page, and get more out of your Apple tech with MacVoices Magazine, free on Flipboard and on the web. And if you find value in it all, consider supporting us through either our Patreon campaign at patreon.com/MacVoices or by making a one-time donation via the PayPal link on our front page and in the show notes of each episode. You will join these fine people who help bring you MacVoices. Advertising handled by Backbeat Media at backbeatmedia.com. Bandwidth provided by CacheFly at cachefly.com.